Beginning of the story. Chapter 1. The Arrival. The skies over Earth changed forever on a bright June morning when the Zorathian fleet appeared without warning. No telescopes or satellites had detected their approach. One moment, the sky was clear. The next, it was filled with enormous alien ships that hovered above Earth's major cities, casting long shadows over everything below. The ships were sleek, dark, and angular, resembling enormous black daggers piercing the heavens. At first, humanity stared in stunned silence. No one knew what to make of the alien presence, and for several agonizing hours, governments scrambled to establish contact, unsure of whether these visitors came in peace or with hostile intentions. But when the Zorathians finally made their message known, it was clear that their intentions were far from peaceful. The broadcast went out simultaneously across every television, radio, and internet-connected device on the planet. A figure appeared on the screen, tall and thin, with a shimmering metallic exoskeleton and eyes that glowed faintly. Its voice was cold, emotionless, and dripping with condescension. "People of Earth," it began, "you have been deemed a primitive species, incapable of meaningful resistance. We, the Zorathians, have arrived to claim this planet as part of our expanding empire. Your history of conflict, pollution, and inefficiency makes you unworthy of ruling this world. Surrender now, and your species will be spared the suffering of war." The alien paused, its glowing eyes narrowing. "But make no mistake. Your resistance will be futile. Your weapons are primitive, your technology laughable. We will crush your defenses and take this world by force if necessary. You have one Earth Day to submit." Around the world, panic erupted. Streets filled with people trying to flee cities, fearing the worst. World leaders convened in emergency meetings, debating whether they should capitulate or attempt to resist. But as chaos spread, a small but growing sentiment began to stir among the people: defiance. In a cramped underground lab in the outskirts of Colorado, Dr. Evelyn Carter watched the broadcast with a mixture of fear and anger. She was a physicist, specializing in electromagnetic fields, and had spent her life studying the universe and its mysteries. Now, an alien race had the gall to insult the very people she had dedicated her life to understanding. "We're not helpless," she muttered, turning away from the screen. "They just don't know what we're capable of." Chapter 2. The Mockery. The Zorathians wasted no time proving their superiority. Within hours of their broadcast, the aliens launched a display of power that sent shockwaves across the planet. Their ships released waves of energy that disabled Earth's entire satellite network, plunging the world into communication blackouts. GPS systems, military satellites, and even commercial television services were knocked offline, leaving the global infrastructure in disarray. World leaders, cut off from one another, struggled to coordinate a response. Fear gripped the population. How could humanity hope to resist an enemy that could disable their most advanced technologies with a flick of the wrist? Dr. Carter, however, was not so easily discouraged. From her underground lab, she studied the energy pulses emitted by the Zorathian ships, determined to find a way to counter their technology. She worked tirelessly, surrounded by a team of engineers and scientists who shared her determination. "They got to have a weak point," she said one night, poring over data with her colleague, Dr. Henry Wallace. "No system is perfect. There's always something they overlooked." Henry, a burly man with a background in engineering, grunted in agreement. "I just don't get how they're doing it. Their energy readings are off the charts, way beyond anything we've seen." "Which means it's probably something we haven't thought of," Evelyn replied, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the screen. "But that doesn't mean it's impossible." As the days passed, the Zorathians made their demands more forcefully. They landed emissaries in the capitals of the world, towering, skeletal figures who communicated in clipped, disdainful tones. The message was always the same: surrender or face annihilation. But while governments hesitated, unsure of how to proceed, resistance began to form elsewhere. In small towns, rural areas, and hidden corners of the world, groups of humans banded together, determined to fight back. And it wasn't just soldiers. Farmers, teachers, mechanics, hackers, ordinary people who refuse to be ruled by fear. Chapter 3. The Resistance Rises. In the ruins of a small town in Eastern Europe, Captain James Callahan crouched behind a pile of rubble, his heart pounding as he watched the Zarathian patrol pass by. He was leading a group of survivors, many of whom had never held a weapon before the invasion. Yet here they were, armed with scavenged rifles and explosives, planning to ambush the alien soldiers. "They think we're weak," Callahan whispered to his team. "They don't expect us to fight back. That's their mistake." The Zarathian patrol, a squad of 8, marched down the street with mechanical precision, their eyes scanning for threats. Callahan knew that taking them head-on would be suicide. But he had a plan, a risky one. "Wait for my signal," he told his team, gripping the detonator in his hand. As the aliens passed a wrecked car, Callahan pressed the button. The explosion was deafening, sending debris flying through the air. The Zarathians were thrown into disarray, their sleek, metallic armor scorched by the blast.
"Now!"
Callahan shouted. His team opened fire, targeting the Zarathians' vulnerable joints and exposed sensors. It wasn't easy. Their armor was nearly impervious to small arms fire, but the humans had learned to aim for the weak spots. One by one, the Zarathians fell, their mechanical forms crumpling to the ground. By the time the battle was over, Callahan's team had taken out the entire patrol with only minimal losses. But as he stood over the fallen aliens, he knew this was only the beginning. The Zarathians might have underestimated humanity, but they wouldn't make that mistake again.